What's up, everybody? Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know. What's up, everybody? We're back at it here. Back in town, back in the office, back talking about these cases that just seem to continue to move in different directions and really let you know what people think about the system, about what they hear, who they believe, when they believe them. And there are some really interesting parts of this process I want to break down today. I don't know what the outcome of the extradition hearing is at this point. Everything is pointing towards he's waiving his extradition and he will be in Idaho soon. I've heard there are going to be press conferences in Idaho. I heard there's going to be press conferences in Pennsylvania. If those press conferences start, let me know. And we will watch some of them together during this live, potentially. Yeah, people are saying he waived it. That's everything that I've seen. So if we get any press conferences that are going live, send me the link. Let me know what channel it's on, and we will check that out. Yeah, it's over. I've heard it's over. I've heard he waived extradition. I just haven't seen any official word of it yet. And somebody's already said hello from Moscow, Idaho, and I'm doing my best to say Moscow. That's what I've been told, not Moscow, Moscow. So I will do my best to call it Moscow. And we're going to start this show off. Everybody hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm just going to show you some of the footage we've seen so far, which is him walking into the courtroom.
Hey, Brian, did you do it? How you
People saying, Brian, did you do it?
Brian, did you do it?
Things like that.
Brian, did you do it?
There's a presser at 4:30 in Pennsylvania. I have heard that as well, Michelle. Thank you for letting me know. That's basically what we got of him entering the courtroom. People are saying he's left the courtroom. And today, yeah, Moscow rhymes with Costco. So we've got all that. Today, all right, so we've got other people listening to reports as well. JB said, the clerk said it was waived. Okay, we trust JB around here. We're going to talk about a couple interesting things today, okay? We're going to talk about extradition. And I'm going to bring my dad on in a little bit, right around 4 o'clock. We'll bring him on and get his explanation of what extradition is, why waive it, why fight it. At this point, it seems like he's waived it. We'll ask him how he thinks that affects a criminal defense case in this situation. We're going to ask him those questions at 4 o'clock. My dad was a former state prosecutor and federal prosecutor. He was the chief of the entire criminal division, dealt with extradition a lot. And now he's obviously a criminal defense lawyer. So we're going to ask him about that as well. A lot of people have been asking for Big George to come on and talk about this case. So we're going to get that happening. But we're also going to talk about how social media is affecting all of this. And if the fact that they're asking for tips still right now after he's been arrested, asking for tips, do we think that Brian Kohberger will demand a speedy trial? And if he does, what does that look like? What does it look like if he does, in fact, demand a speedy trial? We're going to get to all that and more. Of course, we are going to get to your questions. DDP is a new member. Danny said, if I'm in green, does that mean I'm a member? Someone gifted me a membership. Wow, thank you. Yes, Danny, that's exactly what it means. We've got a lot of generous folks here that make this chat really fun, the entire group really fun, uplifting through difficult conversation topics that we have. Marty is here. What's up, Marty? Ash is also here. Would his PhD in criminology give him similar knowledge to the legal system as an attorney? No. Criminology is more, and like he was studying, it seems like criminals and what they did. He was studying more the process. It almost sounded like he was going more like psychologist into criminal psychology, maybe even law enforcement versus being a lawyer. That's what it seems like based on what his resume is. But we'll get into more of that later. Andrea, thank you for the big super sticker here to start us off. So let's talk for a little bit about what's going on. His public defender in Pennsylvania, which we talked about, he's not really going to represent him through the case, but this guy has been all over the media. He's been giving quotes left and right. And in my opinion, if you represent a client in a case like this, you don't want to give a quote publicly unless it's going to be something that's beneficial or helps your client. So when I hear him say things like he's a little bit shocked, but he's very intelligent and he has a calm demeanor, I'm not sure how that really helps your client. Shocked by the charges, I guess, okay, but he's intelligent. He has a very calm demeanor. He's been very easy to talk to. Those are some of the quotes the lawyer has said about Kohberger in this case. And to me, the public is going to take that and run with it. Oh, he's calm. Oh, he's easy to talk to because he doesn't even care because he's a sociopath. He must have done this. I also saw a former FBI agent on some other YouTube channel talking about how not if he committed these murders, but how many other murders has Brian Kohberger committed in addition to these 4 Idaho murders. And I'm like, what? I'm very taken aback by this because I think we need to just slow our roll, as we've talked about, let the process take place, see if the evidence comes out that proves he's guilty. Not that he's a vegan, not that he's a criminology student, not that he lived 6 miles away, not even that he drives a white Elantra. But we need more evidence that actually proves he committed this crime. And right now we just don't have it. I'm not saying we won't get it. And I hope he is the right guy for everyone involved. For the victim, so they get justice, and for him, because if he's not the right guy, his life is pretty much over at this point. And social media is not going to let up. So it's Sydney again, who's out there giving memberships away. I see everybody thanking her. She is incredibly generous and constantly does stuff like this. So thank you, Sydney. We also heard some very interesting stories about how his dad came and drove him across country. We've gotten more reports on the timing of that. It very much seems like it was a very common schedule for every student going home for Christmas break. He didn't leave immediately after the murders. Now, that doesn't prove or disprove anything, but he didn't flee immediately after. And his dad flew out to help him drive across country. It's a long drive. That's understandable. They got pulled over twice in Indiana, once for speeding, once for following too closely. And you think about this and it almost feels like it's a movie, right? And it feels like it's fake. Except that stuff like this happens more than you would expect. We had a federal criminal trial. One of the first cases I tried in federal court. It was a month-long trial. And our client was accused of something very serious. And there was a lot of FBI surveillance, tailing, tape recording, wiretapping, tons of documents and recordings we had to go through. So the FBI was surveilling our client for months and months and months. And it was wild to hear this story. Okay. So the FBI is following our client. And our client is driving in Florida, lots of toll roads in Florida. And he stopped at a toll. He did not have enough money to pay the toll. So he gets out of his car, walks to the car behind him to ask for the $1.50 for the toll. And who is behind him? Undercover FBI agents. Did he know that? No. Did they give him the $1.50? Yes. They gave him the $1.50. He goes up, pays the toll, keeps going through the toll, and they keep following him. This type of stuff blows my mind that this happens in real life, not in shows, not in the movies. Very wild. And it seems similar here. They're following this potential murderer through Indiana, and he gets pulled over not once, but twice. It's wild. It's wild to think about how that stuff actually happens. All right. Will he ask for a speedy trial? That's one of the big questions in this case. And we are going to talk about it later on in the episode because I do want to get to another statement made by the Gonsalves' family attorney, because we watched him say that they were told before everybody else, this is what they were told, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to make sure that we get the full story because now it's seeming a little bit more like he's saying that they left us in the dark. They did not give us enough information. So this is about a 1-minute clip we're going to watch together before bringing my dad on.
Attorney for victim Kaylee Gonzalez.
Let's see. I can't really hear it. Let me put these on. Maybe I'll hear it better.
Salvas's family. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think everybody was relieved. The family was relieved, and you know, it's long from over. The next, you know, that chapter's kind of closed at least, and then now the next chapter starts. You know, the whole criminal justice process, and so I think everyone had a little bit of relief and was able maybe to sleep at night, and then now it's back to the grind again. So we had no idea. They hadn't released any information, had no heads up about anything. I think I received a call on. It was about 10:30, I think, on Thursday night, and from the Moscow Police Department, letting me know that they were in the process of taking someone into custody. They didn't release the name or any of that information to us that night. I immediately called the family and spoke with them. They were obviously, you know, happy and relieved to a certain degree. And then I got more information, more details about who the defendant was in the case the next morning.
All right, I'm back here with my A-list.
So, seems like maybe they weren't kept in the loop quite as much as it had seemed. And that's something that's not going to make them very happy. And my guess is they were excited when there was finally a suspect and there was an arrest made, but now they probably still don't have the information that they're waiting for. And that's probably very frustrating, and we can understand that. Thank you, Miss Jen, for the super sticker. We've got a ton of new members here. Danielle, Christopher is a new member. Let's see here. A couple others I saw come in. Greta Siegel and Francie Gray. Welcome to the membership crew here. All right. Leela, how is Hogue? The updates are pretty vague. I'm not sure. We're still praying for him. We're still waiting to see what happens here. Tori, crazy. Are there or can any state be a sovereign state? Were there sovereign states in history? What would that look like? No, at this point, it doesn't seem like we have any issues like that. And I don't know of any states that are sovereign and try to block or not work with other states. Most states all work with each other. When you said crazy, I thought you were going to talk about insanity. Idaho doesn't have an insanity defense. We talked about it in the Valodeba a little bit, but there is an insanity element to understanding the mens rea of what you were doing and part of the crime. So it can be worked into a case. And that's another reason why the comments from the public defender in Pennsylvania, he's saying he's very cool, calm, collected, intelligent, and easy to speak to. Is he ruining any chance that he has an insanity defense if that's something that ends up coming up into the future? Because that's a medical diagnosis, not necessarily made by lawyers, but are this lawyer's statements hurting his chance at an insanity plea? Maybe. Miranda, thoughts on his family's statement? It's what I would expect his family to say. I heard his family was going to be in court today. They're interested in, they're cooperating with law enforcement. They think that they're helping prove his innocence. We went through the entire statement on the prior video we did. I encourage you to check that out and like that one as well. Audrey, how will he travel back? Private or commercial? Usually they do this different ways. Sometimes they'll bus him over. Sometimes they'll fly him over, do it with a U.S. Marshal, somebody from Idaho. Sometimes there'll be a law enforcement from each agency that'll be with him to fly him over. They do it all different ways depending. They're not going to sit him next to somebody on a commercial flight, though. Jamie, I agree. The media, that's a good question for my dad, dude. We can ask him when we talk about extradition, the different ways that they've transported people back. I agree. The media has already prosecuted him, Jamie, and that's a really, really tough look in this case. Be kind. Peter, thank you. I was thinking the same thoughts. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to watch some of this. It really is. I get people want to be exciting. I get people want to get people watching and get people want the clicks, but we've got to be really careful here and treat others how we want to be treated. Give me 1 second. All right. Michael, TikToker Ashley claims that she is spiritual witness and that she will file charges against the prosecutor of the professor's lawyer, Wendy Austin, for witness tampering. We'll follow that because I think it's going to be wild. Taryn, I've needed an injury attorney in the last couple of years, and you guys are amazing. Thank you for what you do. Taryn, awesome. Keep our number and our email now. If you ever need an injury lawyer, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about your case. Happy to do that. Mary Malarkey, Brian Enton, Brian Enton just tweeted, the judge said he has to be sent to Idaho within 10 days. Just saw BK walking out of the courtroom. He looks terrified, almost like he was holding his breath. Okay, so Brian is a very good source. He's been on top of this case the entire time. If you don't follow him on Twitter, go ahead and follow him. Follow me as well at Tragos Law on Twitter. So we have 10 days that he's going to go back. And then once he appears in an Idaho court, then stuff starts coming out. Documents start getting unsealed, like the arrest affidavit. So we will have to keep track of that. All right. Rebel Duck. I got my $1.68 toll bill from Florida in the mail. That's the cost of the stamp and envelope. LOL. Hi, Peter. I know it's wild when that happens. It really is wild. Sandra is a new member. Welcome, Sandra. As is Vivian Wright. And Lito with a super sticker. Awesome, awesome. All right, let me... All right, while we wait for my dad to come on, let's go ahead and talk speedy trial. Okay, so we've talked about a couple different ways about why he would demand speedy trial and how it could be attacked for him. In Idaho, it's 6 months, okay? And we're going to look at a document that kind of explains that a little bit better, but 6 months. Some people think that's a lot of time. Some people think that's not a lot of time. The state's already had another 6 weeks. So if they put the full court press, they can probably get it done in 6 months. He could probably get it done in 6 months. So maybe that is going to be enough time. Public defender being involved, they're less likely to demand a speedy trial than a private lawyer, percentage-wise. So we'll see. If it's a capital case, which I expect it to be, if we look at Valo Daybell, I expect this one to also be a capital case. He'll have to get a court-appointed lawyer that is death penalty certified. I believe they get 2 lawyers in Idaho if it's a capital case. So all of that usually equals no speedy trial. But if he did, yeah, a lot of people are saying 6 months is not that speedy. I also see a lot of people like See My TU2 who are new from this case. Welcome. Welcome in. Let's take a look at this explanation. I think that'll help you understand what can happen in Idaho when dealing with speedy trials here. So let's zoom in just a little. All right. Criminal defendants are entitled to a speedy trial by the 6th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States and Article 1, Section 13 of the Idaho Constitution and Idaho Code 193501. The statutory right set forth in the Idaho Code requires a court to dismiss a case if a defendant is not brought to trial within certain 6-month timeframes unless good cause to the contrary is shown. And it's 6 months usually from that preliminary hearing that he has. Good cause means, and this is the important part, is what happens if there is a speedy trial and it gets delayed? Is the case automatically going to get dismissed? Or are there certain factors like that we're going to explain in this document where his case could get delayed even more than 6 months? Because if this is something that happens, you will know what to look for and if his case really can get dismissed on a technicality or if there are going to be other ways to make this happen. Okay, good cause means that there was a substantial reason for the delay that rises to the level of a legal excuse, very vague. Since, quote, there is no fixed rule for determining what constitutes good cause, the matter is initially left to the discretion of the district court. Okay, so it's left to the district court, but there are factors in helping determine this. In order to determine whether a defendant has been deprived of the state constitutional right to a speedy trial, Idaho has adopted the 4-part balancing test used by the United States Supreme Court to determine whether a defendant's federal constitutional right to a speedy trial has been violated. So this is very similar in a lot of courts. The 4 factors to be balanced are: 1, the length of the delay. Is it a week or is it 5 years? The reason for the delay. Did the prosecutor get COVID or did the prosecutor want to take vacation? Right? Big difference in those reasons for delay. Number 3, the assertion of the accused right to speedy trial. Does he actually demand it? Does he want it? Is he doing everything he possibly can to get this case to trial? Or is he also delaying and not actually asserting his right, but trying to win on a technicality? 4, the prejudice to the accused. If it's 1 week past 6 months, is he really prejudiced? If it's 5 years and he's losing witnesses now, much more prejudiced. And that's how they look at it. The first factor, length of delay, is a trigger. And until there is some delay, which is presumptively prejudicial, it is unnecessary to inquire into other 3 factors. Meaning, If it's a day, a week, or probably even a month, we're probably not even going to look into the other factors because that's not enough of a delay to be prejudicial. As to the second factor, the reason for delay, it should be noted that the court, as a state actor, has an obligation to dispose of matters within a reasonable time so as to not infringe upon the defendant's right to a speedy trial. Barker v. Wingo is the case everyone cites. It is the speedy trial case, basically. So a very interesting look as to whether or not this will be a speedy trial. And if there are delays, we can see whether or not they're legitimate delays, whether or not they're prejudicial delays. And it'll give us a better understanding as to why this case may not go to trial as quickly as he may want to. All right. Let's get to a couple more questions here. Thank you, Lita, for the super sticker. Jackie Kennedy is a new member. Kathy Allwart, also a new member. Jessica Plumpton is also sending us some good stuff here. So I see people saying the presser. Where is it? Hold on one second. Is Dad going to get on? We're live here waiting for him. So if he could get on, that would be awesome. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Little behind the scenes there for you. See if he's going to get on here. If not, we may. Yeah, my phone is ringing. I'm calling my dad to see if he's actually going to sign on here. Dylan, also a new member. So people are saying the presser, if you see, tell me what channel the presser is on. Ashley King said, check the Insta that you sent me. Let me see here. Yes, Ashley, I did. Live stream at podcast.live.psp. I'd rather get it from like a YouTube channel if that is easier. Does the defendant know the evidence against him? He has not been arraigned. He has not been read the charges against him, the evidence. So it's very possible that he doesn't know the evidence against him at this point. And it seems as if the Pennsylvania public defender does not really want to get into all of that. So we've got to make sure we know that as well. JB said they're going to cover the presser on WFLA. Okay, we can check that out. Cheryl, thank you for the super sticker here. Alicia Harper, welcome. Yeah, so here we go. This is a great example here, Spac Ninja. And it's not your fault because I'm not hating on you for this because this is a good comment. Did you hear something about the daughter of the BTK killer is somehow linked? So apparently the person who wrote the book on the BTK killer and interviewed his daughter and things like that taught a class or was involved in teaching Brian Kohberger, and he may or may not have taken a class from this professor. So that's the connection from what I've heard. Again, how many students do you think that professor has taught? Tons of students. She's a professor, right? So again, we're seeing these connections, we're making these connections. It could be true, but again, sometimes we can have a snowball effect here that can be a major issue. Lita, Peter, students who only live temporarily in Idaho can't be called to jury duty. Is that correct? Usually that is correct. It's based on driver's license. I'm not positive about the laws of Idaho, but yes, that probably would be correct. All right, my dad is here. We will add him to the stream now. All right. Hello.
Hello.
All right. Welcome in, everybody. Let's talk about two things. We had one question first about extradition, and then we'll kind of go through more of an explanation. How are they going to transport him, you think?
Well, they have many options, but if you want a guess from me, they'll put him on a plane. The sheriff's office has planes. The state prosecutors have planes. So my guess is they'll do it by plane. A lot of times they do it by bus, where they have actually prison buses that make stops along the way.
Mhm.
But in this case, I think they're going to try to.
Oh, I don't know what happened there. Okay. I don't know what's happening here. Do non-death penalty states ever refuse extradition unless death penalty states waive the death penalties? Some courts do. Are you with us, Dad? Try logging out and logging back in. Bodie, I am drinking coffee. Why? Can you hear the? I don't even think there's any ice left in it, so I don't think you can hear it. It's just it's iced coffee. All right. So we'll keep rolling here. Hi, Papa T, Marty. Hopefully you didn't speak too soon. Okay, so extraditions. When we talk about extraditions in this case, and we discuss what happens when extraditions are part of the case. All right, are you in?
I'm in.
Okay. We'll try this one more time. Jessica, do non-death penalty states ever refuse extradition unless death penalty states waive the death penalty like some countries do?
No, that is an international issue. That doesn't happen in the United States because we have a constitutional provision of the full faith and credit clause where every state has to respect the laws of other states.
Yeah, and there was a question, is there a sovereign state that just kind of goes rogue? And the answer is no.
No, that doesn't happen. They have an international compact where all the states agree on their extradition procedures.
Magical Mary, Ann Taylor is the chief public defender defending him in Idaho. I haven't seen that that's the case yet, but we'll keep following it. Magical Mary, if you do have where that is, send it to me on Instagram or Twitter. Okay, so tell us about extradition. What's the purpose of it? Why do we have it? What are some of the arguments against it? Why would somebody waive extradition?
Well, to begin with, you've got the full faith and credit clause that I just mentioned in the United States Constitution. That requires every state to give full faith and credit to all the laws of other states. Secondly, you have you have a state compact, which is an agreement with all the states and all the legislatures pass the same statute as to a procedure of how they're going to do it. There's a warrant sent to one state, they arrest the guy, then they send what's called a governor's warrant, where the governor has to look at the paperwork, sign off on it, the governor of the state, like for instance, in this case, Pennsylvania. That governor would have to sign off on it. It would go to the state court. He would be held based on that governor's warrant. And then, similar to a habeas corpus, then his defense lawyer could challenge the technicalities of the warrant. And the other way it's challenged is he is not the guy they talk about in the warrant. He's not Joe Smith, or he's not whoever his name is in the warrant. It is a very, very rare that an extradition fight is successful. And in this case, they obviously knew that, and they're going to waive extradition from what we know.
And it seems like that has been waived. He has to be in Idaho within 10 days, and then he'll be arraigned in Idaho, and the probable cause arrest affidavit will be unsealed. The Pennsylvania Police Department is apparently doing a press conference. Everybody's doing a press conference at some point in this case. So we'll see what they say. Ashley King has a question. Papa Tragos, what evidence and info is needed for a judge to grant an early morning SWAT warrant for arrest, I believe, in the gated community home for arrest?
The judge doesn't grant that. The judge grants the warrant, or grants the search warrant or the arrest warrant. And it is up to the law enforcement agency to do the appropriate going. So if it's appropriate to bust the door down, they bust the door down. If it's appropriate to go into a gated community, they go into a gated community. But the judge doesn't dictate the law enforcement procedure for the arrest or for the search. That's up to the agency.
Right. So they just say, yes, you can do it. And then how you actually do it, that'll be up. SWAT chose to do it at 3 a.m.
Right. Because frankly, how's a judge going to know what's the appropriate way for them to actually attack it? The judge probably isn't even trained to talk about those kind of tactics.
Deborah D said, Peter, we lost Big George in mid-statement. Was he saying in this case they will fly him back to Idaho rather than a prison bus? That's you. That's what you would guess, right?
I would guess they would fly him because of the type of case it is, the high publicity and the security they're going to want to maintain, because they can really secure him on a plane. They'll send a small jet probably and pick him up, or a prop plane, fly him back, and they'll have total control over the environment for the whole trip.
Michelle said, Peter, this may be old news, but did you know that the Idaho killer may have called the podcaster named T-Rev? Is still trying to verify it was really him. I did hear about this. I've heard of a bunch of different stories like this, but apparently, yes, he did call in to talk about it. We'll see if it was him. Same thing with the Reddit post from a student at the university that he studied for his master's. They posted something on Reddit trying to talk to criminals to understand their thinking and their mindset through it. We've also seen some Instagram accounts. Verifying this stuff will be difficult and important. And if it is verified and authentic and comes in a trial, it'll have a lot more pull on me personally. Kuvira said, I saw the iced coffee video you made, Peter. It looked like a barista made it. I'll have to try it. I'm very good at mixing some iced coffees together. Tori, Papa Tragos, was there an old case that prompted the need for an extradition treaty to be put through the judicial system? Do you know why extradition had to be created through our judicial system?
Well, yes. Actually, what happened was every state, and we talked about this a while ago, we've explained sovereignty. Every state is sovereign. Pennsylvania is a sovereign state. So is Idaho. So you've got the country, which is this big umbrella, and then everything within the country, all these states have sovereign authority. So in order to move a person from one sovereign authority to another sovereign authority, you had to have some type of procedure. And they all got together and said, look, we've got to have the same procedure. We can't sit around it. One place do it one way and one place do it another. So that's when they went ahead and did it.
Yeah. And again, when we talk about sovereign, and I said, no state's going to do this. Every state is sovereign, but no state is going to start a war with another state individually, right? We could always have a civil war, of course.
Well, we did one time, I think. We did that once.
Okay. You mean
we had
civil
a civil
war?
war?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, unless it's something like that. But good question. And Tori was the one that asked about the other states being individually sovereign. Ashley King, why did the FBI follow him to Pennsylvania or in Pennsylvania for multiple days? So he was in Idaho. He drove cross country. They apparently surveilled and followed him. The reason is they didn't want him to disappear. He was a person of interest. Once they had contact with him, once they knew where he was, they didn't want him to disappear. They didn't want him to go into marshlands, up into a tree where they couldn't find him, even if they were searching for him. So that's why the FBI will just continue to follow a suspect. Now, why don't you talk about this, Dad? What does it actually take for the FBI or for law enforcement to follow somebody and surveil somebody? It's an even lower bar than what you need for probable cause to arrest them, which is an even lower bar than beyond a reasonable doubt to convict them in trial. But this was even before they had enough to arrest him. They were following him. What does it take for that?
Well, I've got to tell you, what it takes is enough information to dedicate resources. It's expensive to follow somebody. You got to realize that it's just not two little FBI agents sitting in a car, but you've got to have 3 shifts, 3 8-hour shifts. You've got to have supervisors. And so you've got a lot of manpower you're dedicating. They must have had something. I mean, it was more than just a suspicion or a person of interest.
Sure.
They had a little bit more on this guy to follow him and dedicate those resources, the time and the money they had to dedicate to it.
For sure. Yeah. And I think they had that in this case. And that's why they did follow him. They didn't want to let him get away on a long drive.
That's going to be really
country.
interesting to find out. There's so much that's going to be really interesting to find out how they put this together.
And it's not like they knew he was going home, right? They could have surmised it since his dad picked him up, but they may have thought maybe his dad's in on it. Maybe his dad's trying to make him disappear or whatever it may be. So they didn't know a whole lot either while they were following him.
Right.
All right. Ashley King, how do they handle strict vegans awaiting trial? I've actually heard some reports on this. You can tell me about your experience, Dad, but I heard some reports on this that he actually is getting the strict diet that he asked for, needs, lives by, whatever it may be. We've had clients with some religious diets and other diets for different reasons, allergies, things like that. And usually they do work with them. Doesn't mean the food's good, but usually they will work with them as best as they can.
Right. If they can accommodate him. Now, that's the thing. If you go to some small county jail and they don't have the ability to accommodate a vegan, he's just going to have to, eat the potatoes he gets. But in the larger facilities, they normally have the ability to do that. And they also have a lot of, for instance, certain special diets like you were talking about. In some of these larger prisons, they have such a population of people that want those special diets that it's worth it for them to produce them.
Yeah. And again, if he's willing to eat, carrots and broccoli or whatever, then that's fine and they'll accommodate.
Right.
But if he says you got to make me cauliflower pizza every night or whatever, I don't know what the restrictions are. But if he's asked for something like that, there's no way that's happening.
No.
Star Sorcerer, when Kohberger arrives in Idaho, is this when the charges will be released? So once he gets arraigned, that's the initial. Have you looked into the process at all in Idaho?
Yeah. Actually, I think after he makes his first appearance,
Right.
They're going to release the affidavit at that point. That's not even his arraignment. That's just when he first shows up in court in Idaho, because they're going to have to justify to the judge that he shows up in that there's probable cause to hold him. So they're going to release the affidavit at that time so the judge can make a decision. Yes, there's probable cause to hold him, and they'll probably do a bond hearing at the same time, and he'll be held, my prediction, without bond. He will be held, he will not get a bond.
Yeah, my guess is he won't get a bond as well, but I think that after that initial appearance, that's when the probable cause affidavit and a lot of the documents are going to be unsealed, and that's when we'll be able to see a lot of that stuff. What's interesting is I actually did see another interview with the guy that used to be, I believe, the state attorney or district attorney in Idaho. He's now a criminal defense lawyer, and he said there actually is no rule that was cited by the prosecutor, the district attorney now, that they can't talk about the case. He said there's no actual rule that says that, but there is a rule of ethics that says lawyers should not discuss any extrajudicial proceedings or processes with the public, and that may be what rule they're looking under to not discuss this in Idaho, which is very interesting.
Well, we have the same thing in Florida,
Right.
where we cannot divulge these items that may prejudice a jury, and that's in Florida. It's a Supreme Court rule because ethics are governed by the Supreme Court in Florida. I'm sure it's the same way in Idaho, and he was trying not to offend the court or to create any problems for himself by doing that.
Yeah, and sometimes it gets violated. Like, I mean, I think in Florida, in the Courtney Clenny case, I think they towed the line a little bit with some of the press conferences the prosecutors gave. When you think about making a murderer, what that prosecutor did, basically convict him and give all this evidence and say that it's him in the public, I think crosses that line. So I think they actually did the right thing in this case.
Well, and also remember, in Florida, we have a lot more public records than they do in Idaho.
Right. Is probable cause released today? No. Or at arraignment after his first appearance? Michelle C., what kind of evidence do you think we will see when the probable cause affidavit is unsealed? I heard that it won't be a lot, but obviously enough to get the judge's approval. What do you think?
I don't know. I think my guess is they're going to have a pretty good probable cause affidavit. Let's face it, they want this information. Everybody wants to see this information. So I think they probably did a very detailed probable cause affidavit. Plus, if you have to prepare one for the extradition, you've got to make sure that you do everything that you can to make sure that they don't have a challenge to it. So I think we're going to see a lot in that probable cause affidavit. I mean, think about it. If everything we hear is true, that the DNA, well, they're going to have to put all that in that affidavit because they've got to make sure they can trace all this information to him. So they've got to put something in there like that.
Yeah, and I honestly could see this one going either way, and we're really guessing at this point, right? They could have just enough. I've seen probable cause affidavits, as you have, that a lot of stuff is redacted out, and they tell us why. But it's like, oh, it's unsealed, but half of it is still redacted, especially the victims in this case. Maybe some of their information will be redacted. They're younger. They're not minors, but they're still younger. So there could still be some redactions in there that we don't get everything. But I do think that they are going to explain how he committed the crime and how they connected him to the crime. There's been talk of DNA evidence. Was it his DNA? Was it 23andMe from a close relative? Was his DNA on the victims, or was it just somewhere in the house? What DNA was found in the car? We have the connected Elantra, but there's thousands of those Elantras. Was it the victim's blood found in the car? They're going to give us, I think, something like that. And hopefully, what I'm really interested in is there a connection? We know he was only 6 miles away. Is there actually a connection between the suspect and the victims? Magical Mary, I sent you info on the Idaho PD via Instagram. Okay, I will check that out. Hi, Papa Tragos. BK allegedly was meant to travel with family on Monday. What processes might have been in place to prevent him from leaving the country?
Well, there's a watch list. We all know there's a watch list of all these border crossings. So they type your name in, and I'm sure he was on the watch list. But I tell you what else they probably did. They probably had a uniform local cop around so that if he did pull away, they'd have him pulled over by a uniform cop, and it would look like a traffic stop, and then they'd end up arresting him. They weren't going to let this guy get away.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple tweets here from Brian Etten that Jeannie sent me on Instagram. Brian Kohberger waived his extradition hearing. He had to sign a waiver in court. The judge explained to Kohberger the charges against him. So he was explaining the charges against him at this point. Doesn't mean he was explaining the evidence that he had against him in Idaho, and that he was voluntarily allowing authorities to transfer him to Idaho. Kohberger told the judge he's not on any medication that would impact him making the decision. The judge said he was to be sent to Idaho within 10 days. Kohberger came into court, made eye contact with his family, sitting in the front row. He nodded at them. His mom cried, and his sister comforted the mom. A deputy brought her tissues. How much do you think he knows at this point?
Well, it depends. You presume he's guilty. He knows a lot. But he knew everything that judge did. He already knew before he went into court. He knew what the charges were. He knew about the 10 days. He knew about the waiver because he had the public defender, and the public defender was going to tell him all that before he went into court. None of this was a surprise. So it was just a formality that they had to go through on the record so that his rights were protected. And so that, when he left the state, that they did everything that they were supposed to do.
All right, here's Mary's tweet from the Idaho Statesman newspaper. He's expected to be back in Idaho, where he'll make his first appearance on 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary in Latah County Court. Ann Taylor, Kootenai County Chief Public Defender, will represent Kohberger when he returns to Idaho. That doesn't necessarily mean she'll be on the case the entire time. I assume she's death penalty certified, but I guess the public defender doesn't have to be death penalty certified. I believe when we went through the Vallow Daybell situation, there's not a ton of death penalty certified lawyers in Idaho. So will she have the same team that Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell has his own lawyer, but that Lori Vallow has? That would be interesting as well, to have these 2 very high profile cases in Idaho, same public defenders with that death penalty certification. Well, it's possible.
The problem is it may really be taxing this public defender system in Idaho. They may not have enough public defenders to handle all this work and all these high profile cases. They may have to contract with lawyers to bring them in to do this.
Some kind of special prosecutor?
Right, or special public defender. Yeah, they may.
Special public defender. Yeah,
they may have to contract. This is a lot of work for, Idaho is not a big state. And so this is a lot of work for a small state and a lot of money they're going to have to spend.
Lux wants to know what death penalty certified lawyer means. You want to explain that real quick?
Sure. A death penalty certified lawyer, the courts have a little while ago started determining that these appeals that death penalty cases have, where they say their lawyer is incompetent, and they've reversed a lot of cases because the lawyers did not properly represent their clients. So they made a rule saying nobody can represent anybody on a death penalty case unless they've gone through the classes that you have to go through and have the experience. So they have to go through certain certification courses that they have to go through, and they have to second chair a death penalty case so that they're actually sitting in there doing a death penalty case with someone with experience, and then they can be certified to do it. This way, they try to minimize those appeals for incompetence that these death penalty cases have. And there were a lot of them, and there were a lot of reversals for lawyers not knowing what they're doing.
Barb, yes, they do have death penalty in Idaho. Amanda, can he get a plea deal? Sure, that's up to the prosecutor. Highly unlikely. Or if there is a plea deal, they'll probably say, okay, instead of death penalty, you can get 4 life sentences, something like that. I can't really see anything better than that. And usually in this type of case, I would think the victims are going to want to be involved. Deidre, love it when Big George comes on. So much information. Thank you. I agree. Julie, I thought states could deny extradition due to death penalty, so I learned something. Thanks, Peter and George. I didn't even know that answer. John O'Rourke, wouldn't the DNA only be listed as a percentage, i.e. 50% male and 30% Bryans? There are different ways that DNA.
Sure. I'm not sure I understand that question, but
he means it's not going to say like within usually what DNA does is they rule out. It's like a 1 in a 10 billion, whatever, that it's somebody other than Brian's DNA or whatever it may be. Usually that's how they kind of do it.
Right. And they have multiple types of DNA analysis, and each type makes it a little bit bigger percentage. This is a quick analysis, 1 in 100 people. And then they have another kind of analysis, 1 in 1,000, then 1 in 10,000. So it really narrows it down if they've done the really big one, which I'm sure they did, to narrow it down to this individual. So it's going to be very hard for someone else to have the exact same DNA.
Agreed. All right, let's go. Do you want to take off now?
No, if you want to, it's up to you.
I know that's
Take a
fine. You can
couple
say
more questions. Okay.
I am going to put on the press conference now with the police. That's on WFLA News Channel 8. They're streaming right now the police press conference. So we're gonna take a look at that and see what they say since the hearing is over now.
If you need me, you know where I am.
Okay, I'll shoot you a text.
Okay. All right.
All right, thanks for coming on. See ya. All right, let's get to the police presser here and watch some of this together. All right.
Breaking news. Suspect Brian Extradition now just into the WFLA Now Stream Center, a feed from Pennsylvania, where Pennsylvania State Police will be speaking momentarily, giving their very latest on the case. JB here with you live, folks, on WFLA Now, alongside my colleague, WFLA's Josh Benson, hanging out the late.
Obviously, what happened will be
Skip ahead here to
the
when
size of the
law enforcement actually
of
starts
media
talking.
that have assembled here in the room. Really not all that surprised considering the magnitude of the case.
All right,
Pennsylvania State
right on
Police.
time.
Here we go.
Let's listen in.
Always dad.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lieutenant Adam Reed. I'm the Director of the Communications Office with the Pennsylvania State Police. Thank you for joining us here. The order of speakers is going to be our Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner, Colonel Robert Ivanchik, Major Christopher Paris, he's our Area 3 Commander, and First Assistant District Attorney, Monroe County, Mike Mancuso. After the speakers have finished, we will then take a handful of questions. Colonel Ivanchik.
Good afternoon. I'm Colonel Robert Ivanchik, Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police. While I monitored the investigation into the horrific murders of the University of Idaho students, I did not imagine the investigation would lead to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. My heart goes out to the families of the victims, their friends, the community of Moscow, and the University of Idaho. No words can heal the pain associated with the loss of a child. Their young lives were ended far too soon. In law enforcement, we understand the best thing we can do for victims and their families is to follow every lead, collect every piece of evidence, and bring those responsible to justice. I am proud of the members of the Pennsylvania State Police who were able to help in this investigation. The cooperative relationship between our local, state, and federal partners stands the test of time. The officers, troopers, and federal agents work together tirelessly, putting in long, difficult hours. Communication and cooperation are imperative to success and to ensure the integrity of the case remains maintained. The culmination of that cooperation ultimately led to take the suspect into custody and afforded the families some sense of peace they deserve. I want to thank the Moscow Police Department, the Idaho State Police, and our partners in the Federal Bureau of Investigation for their support, assistance, and coordination. I also want to recognize the Monroe County District Attorney's Office. And finally, I need to acknowledge the members of the Pennsylvania State Police, specifically members of Troop N, our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and our Bureau of Emergency and Special Operations.
It's nice to see. It is nice to see right here that, you know, we live in the United States of America, that states work together, our resources and our tax dollars. If somebody from another state comes into our state, we want to catch them. We want justice. We're all on the same page. We do come together as a community, even though, you know, when it's election season, we'll fight about everything, whether it's a state, whether it's a politician, whatever it may be. So it is nice to see this, in my opinion. It's only on 1.25 speed, so we're not going that fast.
Who assisted in safely taking the suspect into custody in the early morning hours of December 30th. As previously indicated by Chief James Fry, of the Moscow Police Department, specific details regarding this investigation cannot be released until the suspect is extradited to Idaho and presented with the probable cause affidavit. At this time, I will turn the microphone over to Major Christopher Paris, commander of Area 3, who was involved in the coordinated efforts to take the suspect into custody.
So now we're going to hear how they did it in Pennsylvania. Emmy, I wouldn't say they rushed it, but I do think the timing was important for them to have a safe campus, at this point for the students to come back to.
Thank you, Colonel. Area 3 comprises troops FP, NNR, and is made up of 1,000 approximately of the women and men, civilian and enlisted, in the northeastern part of Pennsylvania. I'd like to introduce to my left Captain Norm Kramer, who's the commander of Troop N Hazleton, which is comprised of Carbon, Monroe, Columbia, and parts of Luzerne counties. I would like to reiterate, as the colonel said, that Idaho law prohibits any release of information contained within the affidavits. So we're going to do our best today to talk about what phase we are currently in the investigation, and it has entered a new phase with the waiver for extradition. And the continuing primary goal is the seeking of justice through successful prosecution and conviction, bearing the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So with that in mind, we're trying to balance essentially two things: the public's desire for information against the need to maintain the integrity of the investigation and protect the suspects, accused at this point's due process.
So that right there, in a nutshell, is what I think every case, every filter, every factor when something like this happens, this is how it should be done. We know the public wants and deserves answers, right? It's our communities, it's our families affected in these different cases. It's our country, it's our state, whatever it may be. So we have a right to this information. We want this information for different reasons. So that's very important, but we have to balance that with protecting the rights of the accused, protecting the jury pool, not poisoning the jury pool, keeping due process rights alive and intact. That's a great explanation of the balancing effect here of why we get certain information and why it takes time sometimes.
So I'll now attempt to give you an operational picture with the best information I can release at the time. So this begins when the Pennsylvania State Police Bureau of Criminal Investigation troopers were contacted by the FBI about assisting with surveillance of the accused in this case. I'd like to take the opportunity to specifically thank several individuals. Special Agent in Charge Jackie McGuire and Assistant Special Agent in Charge Dave Carter from the Philadelphia Field Division, as well as Supervisory Special Agent Bill Vigorito of the Scranton RA. We're very lucky in PSP to have a collaborative relationship with the Bureau, both in Pennsylvania and beyond, and their people are absolutely excellent. So as the investigation progressed, Troop N Criminal Investigation Section, commanded by Captain Kramer over my left shoulder here, began to collaborate with authorities in Idaho. Specifically, I'd like to acknowledge Lieutenant James Curto, who is here today, Sergeant Anthony Ferdinand, Corporal John Chulak, who is not present with us, and Troopers Leary and Knoll, who are here with us today. It was through this collaboration and the charges pending in Idaho that those troopers were able to obtain search warrants and a fugitive justice warrant that was prepared here in Monroe County for the location in Chestnut Hill Township and the fugitive from justice warrant for Mr. Kohberger, respectively. I'd like to acknowledge the Monroe County District Attorney, David Christine, as well as First Assistant Mike Mancuso and their entire office. The support that we received was absolutely excellent. Once those warrants were obtained, the Bureau of Emergency and Special Operations, BESO, coordinates our Special Emergency Response Team, CERT. They were selected to serve those warrants, the 3 search warrants and the fugitive from justice warrant. To define what CERT is, it's a full-time tactical team maintained by PSP to deal with high-risk warrant situations, barricades, and other incidents requiring specialized tactical training or other capabilities. From their perspective, we essentially task them to go out and serve a arrest warrant for someone accused of a quadruple murder. They're activated several hundred times a year throughout the Commonwealth. We don't typically hear of their work in a forum like this because they serve the warrant.
Deb T, I see you say another Academy Award speech. They do like to thank everybody over and over again, but it is a team effort. They do work really hard on these cases. iSchool AXU, if the lawyers believe that he's guilty, they'd not let him plead not guilty, right? Example, BTK pled guilty right away. If the lawyers know he's guilty, what do? Sorry, I joined late. If answered, we'll check the video. So a lot of times people will change their plea to guilty, admit that they did it, but start out with a not guilty plea for a lot of reasons. And sometimes it's the wrong charge. Sometimes they're working on a plea deal to get a different sentence or a lesser sentence. So it's not always that they did it and they automatically plead guilty. That is not how the system works here. In fact, almost all cases plead not guilty.
The person's taken into custody and they go about their assignment. They are the ultimate professionals. It's a volunteer team. They're highly trained and highly motivated. Captain Norm Kramer over my left shoulder was assigned as the top comm for the CERT activation, which means he was responsible for coordinating our tactical preparations. So tactical assets were then staged in the county, in Monroe County, into the evening of Thursday, December 29th, last Thursday. And in the early hours of Friday, December 30th, those warrants were executed at the location. Mr. Kohberger was taken into custody without incident. The scene was turned over to the FBI Evidence Response Team for processing. Mr. Kohberger was then turned over to the Monroe County Prison, where he has remained in their custody since. I'd like to thank the Monroe County Sheriff and the Stroud Regional Police Department for their support as well during the extradition process. Arrangements currently are being made to deliver Kohberger back to Idaho, where he can have continued due process and face these charges. So it's with that, I will turn it over to First Assistant Mike Mancuso.
Thank you, Major. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Mancuso with the DA's office.
So this is the first assistant, meaning the chief assistant, so the second in command at the prosecutor's office. He will be part of the prosecution team.
First Assistant District Attorney. I want to give my condolences to the families of the victims out in Idaho for their loss. It's my sincere hope that this marks a clear step in the right direction of effectuating justice for those folks. My office's role was relatively recent. We weren't advised of the presence of the defendant in our county until only a couple days before the apprehension of the defendant. But when we were told, we came together and worked very closely with Captain Kramer, who did an excellent job in almost like a clockwork operation. Part of my duties were to ensure that 3 separate search warrants were issued. Those affidavits attached to those search warrants are still under seal, so I can't discuss their contents with you.
But he's seen them, right? So he's not going to be the one trying the actual case against him, but he's part of the prosecution team here in Pennsylvania, and he has seen those sealed documents, which is interesting. So he's not going to talk about them. We know Idaho's not going to talk about them until they get unsealed, so it's very interesting. Valerie asked, can he take a plea deal even after claiming he's not guilty? Ashley K, if he were to take a plea deal where they still go to jury trial, would it affect sentencing? No, there would not be a jury trial in the guilt phase. Yes, he could change his plea and get a plea deal. If he pleads not guilty at first, later he can plead guilty for a lesser sentence. If he does accept a certain sentence with a plea deal, there probably wouldn't be any need for a jury trial. I'm not sure if in Idaho they have a death penalty phase trial like we do here in Florida. As we saw with Nicholas Cruz, they can plead guilty and still have that death penalty phase trial. Jojo, have you seen Cece Moore? It's amazing how she solves cases with genetic genealogy. I think she's brilliant. You're looking for only a 1% match to figure out whose DNA it is. I have not. I have not. Very interesting, though.
But one was for the person of Mr. Kohberger, collecting DNA and photographs, that sort of thing. One was for the white Elantra vehicle, which I understand has been seized and is being processed. And one was for the address, the residence itself that he was living in.
So 3 warrants for his arrest, for the white Elantra, and the residence. Interesting.
With his family. I was at the scene, and I have to say that Major Paris and Captain Norm Kramer did an outstanding job in coordinating the efforts, not only of the numerous Pennsylvania State police troopers there, but officers from other jurisdictions and disciplines within those jurisdictions to make this a very smooth, highly competent professional operation. It is a quirk, apparently. It's not in the norm of the states I'm familiar with that Idaho does not release their probable cause affidavit in support of their arrest warrant until after their defendant is returned to that state. But having read those documents and the sealed affidavits of probable cause, I definitely believe that one of the main reasons the defendant chose to waive extradition and hurry his return back to Idaho was the need to know what was in those documents.
Interesting. So, hey, we get a nugget here. So he thinks that one of the reasons he waived that extradition and didn't fight it, didn't try to delay the case, waived some of his rights in this case, because that's what he did, is because he wants to know what's in those sealed documents. And Bodie asked, why would the prosecutor in Pennsylvania need to see the probable cause statement? Because you can't just take people's word for it, even if it's another DA's office or other law enforcement. You can't just say, hey, here's the probable cause, go ahead and do it. Because if they would have read it and said, no, we don't think this is enough, then they're not going to want to put their energy, time, and resources to go arrest the wrong person or go execute a warrant against somebody that they don't think there's really enough here for. So their office is responsible for their actions, right? So if they would have gone and screwed something up, they could be liable. They could get sued. Something could happen on their end. So they had to look at it, make sure all is copacetic. They did. And it's very interesting that he thinks the reason the defendant waived this was to get the information from that sealed probable cause affidavit, which is very interesting.
So that's a significant development. Beyond that, looking at the scope of the situation and the ties this defendant has to my county, I would hold our office at the disposal of the Idaho authorities to help facilitate a complete background investigation into the defendant, both activities prior to the murders occurring within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and his activities after the murders in Pennsylvania. So we stand.
So he's willing to continue to help them. It seems like this was the place where the defendant grew up. It's where his family lived now. It's where he was going back home, you know, as we say when we were students. So he's going to stay in the case and he's going to continue to help, which is good news for justice. John O'Rourke, I know everyone is stating to be patient for facts, but what if it's because they don't have the murder weapon or something? Something seems fishy. I still think just another viewpoint to discuss. And we will continue to discuss that viewpoint on this channel, John. You know that.
And ready to assist with that effort on an ongoing basis. Thank you.
All right. So that I think was probably going to be the most interesting one. I think there's more law enforcement agencies that are going to speak out here. If we're almost 5,000 people in the chat, which is wild. If you haven't subscribed to our page, hit that subscribe button, hit that reminder bell. We are going to continue to follow this case. We've been following it for a while now. A ton of interesting stuff is coming out, and we want to make sure we keep the legal angles, break down what's going to actually come in court. What can they actually prove? How are they going to prove it? We talk about extradition, speedy trial, all the legalities is what we're going to break down on this show. In this case, we're not going to be a whodunit type channel. So there are other channels like that if you want to follow them, but that's what our channel is about. I'm a real personal injury and criminal defense lawyer in the Tampa Bay area, and this is the type of stuff we talk about on this channel. So hit that subscribe button and let me know if you're new here from the Idaho 4 case by putting Idaho 4 in the chat or the comments.
We can now open it up for questions.
All right, questions. Here we go.
What state police specifically did, or can you give us any indication as to the operations of the state police?
What questions would you guys have for the Pennsylvania police? Put some questions in the live chat here and in the comments. Let me know what questions you would have, and we'll see if any of them are the same. And if not, maybe I can answer some of yours.
When you were notified, you talked about being tactical in the area. How long were they there? And what's the?
We're not in a position to give you an exact time. It was at some point prior to when the surveillance was taken, as the investigation progressed to a point where search warrants could be obtained and the probable cause for those search warrants and an arrest warrant, a fugitive from justice warrant based on the arrest warrant out in Idaho were obtained. We began to take the tactical steps to plan to serve them.
Were you collecting evidence prior to his arrest?
At this point, like we said, it's very much pertinent to what's in the affidavits, which we cannot speak about.
What's your about his demeanor when the arrest actually happened?
Present sense impression, as likewise ongoing investigation can't discuss.
How, Robin, 69 News, how is Kohberger being transported back to Idaho?
Those arrangements are being discussed right now, as well as the logistics, the court orders.
Literally questions you guys had. How is he being transported?
Says, those of you who heard it today, it's within the next 10 days. So we're currently working on that.
They don't have the answer yet, which is what we said. We don't know, but that's really interesting. It's exactly a question you all had.
In coordination with authorities out in Idaho. Sir? I can't comment. I don't know.
Is he being held in the Monroe County jail until he's extradited, or is he removed to another?
No, he is lodged in since he was dropped off there Friday morning. He's resided in Monroe County Prison.
Still, until he's
Correct,
extradited,
yes.
he'll be there by the marshals, or which group?
At this point, that's still being coordinated between the state police and the authorities out there. We don't know.
Will the affidavit be unsealed when he arrives in Idaho?
I don't want to speak out of my lane. When I watched the press conference on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific time, I was alerted to the fact that according to Idaho state law, that the affidavits have to be served to him once he's extradited back before they could be unsealed.
Has anyone else been arrested?
Ongoing investigation.
Has a motive been determined?
I can't comment on that either. I apologize.
Who transports him, sir? Does Pennsylvania State Police, the Monroe County Sheriff's Department?
He's presently back. He was transported from the courthouse by Monroe County Sheriff, and the logistics of who's going to transport him out to Idaho are still being discussed. We don't know. Yeah.
Can you confirm the time of his arrest and how much law enforcement presence there actually was?
I would say it was in the early morning hours of Friday, December 30th. Tactical assets on scene were probably in the neighborhood of 50.
Were you afraid he was going to get tipped off before you got him?
I would say overall about this entire operation, and the credit goes, this is a part that the state police played humbly. You look at Moscow Police Department, 38 sworn, 19,000 leads, the video evidence that they had to develop in order to put that out, all public source information. But when you talk about the service of a high-risk warrant for someone who's committed or alleged to have committed 4 homicides, there's nothing routine about that. And all of those tactical steps that were taken were in conjunction with the best efforts of the authorities, local, state, and federal, both in Idaho and here, to ensure that we could do it safely and to ensure that we could get him into custody, and that those service of the search warrants could occur.
Sir, can we ask a question of the first assistant?
All right, so they want to ask the district attorney some questions. So now he's coming on screen. I will talk through some of the questions that they asked and some of the answers.
Thank you. So you described having read to a degree the contents of that affidavit of probable cause, and that you possibly speculated or theorized that he wanted to get back to read that as well, since he can't read that. Can you give us an indication, though, of the seriousness of what you did read? I know you can't talk about it, but can you share with us something?
Yeah, I can't get into the details, sir, but I can say it involved the defendant's connection to a scene of a crime consisting of 4 murdered people. So that's the significance of it.
Can you confirm that there is a connection between Brian Kohberger and any of the victims?
I can't discuss that.
How confident are you that he is guilty of these crimes?
That's the question I would have asked. Oh, my question would have been about the connection. Somebody else. Oh man, I thought I started. Somebody else asked, "How do you know he's the guy?" And that's the question that was just asked.
That wouldn't be my place to say. Certainly confident enough that there was ample probable cause for the issuance of the various warrants in the case.
What was your reaction when you heard this? You've all talked about, you followed this. This happened states away. When you get that call, or you all get the call, that this person could be right here in your home area, what's your reaction?
Well, I was surprised. Really, Monroe County of all places. It hits close to home. It's
That's
a normal
for sure.
human reaction, I would think, under the circumstances.
A lot of
Do you
people
know
heard
when
that.
he and his father left Idaho or Washington Grove, Pennsylvania, what that date was?
No, I don't know the exact date. Man.
Approximately, we understand the middle of December. Is that correct?
I think that's approximate.
And what about, we had heard reports that they were stopped not once but twice on the highway. Can you elaborate?
I'll defer to his Pennsylvania public defender on that.
Do you have reason to believe that Kohberger is connected to other crimes and unsolved mysteries in the area?
That's another thing that I guess the public defender said, because nobody else would have necessarily known that he was stopped in Indiana twice. Maybe Brian told his public defender, then his public defender told the. I mean, it's just such a weird. But that he did the right thing and say, "I'll defer to the public defender," because nobody told me that. Is probably what he's thinking.
I wouldn't answer that question at this time.
Start looking at some that may be unsolved, or do you move around?
That would be a normal thing to do.
Question for the PSP here. Said he was taken without incident. Was it safe to say that? I should say it's safe to say, but did it seem like he was expecting?
I would comment on what his present sense was. I would just comment that the professionalism of the CERT team and their tactical training definitely proved in a situation like this to do it in the most tactically sound and fastest way possible.
So you hear all the question asked, was he expecting to get arrested? What do you think that means? That obviously he's guilty, consciousness of guilt, know that he's guilty. And he said, I can't comment on what he was thinking, but the team was so professional, and that's why it was without incident we made this arrest.
Was there anybody else in the house at the time?
His parents were in the house at the time.
Did they say anything to you?
Again, present sense impression. I can't comment on that ongoing investigation.
You went down the door.
Force was used. The warrants were issued.
I'm not sure what he meant by present sense impression there. That's not like an objection that he can't answer that. If he wants to say, I don't want to answer that right now, obviously he doesn't have to answer that because it's an ongoing investigation, but I don't know what present sense impression meant right there.
For evening search warrants, which in Pennsylvania requires additional probable cause in order to serve them at the hours of darkness. I would defer to the first assistant to talk about the legal burden that you bear in order to obtain those. But from a tactical standpoint, based upon all of the briefings that we had developed and all of the intelligence we had developed, we thought that was the best time to serve it.
And what tipped off that Pennsylvania was involved with this?
We were alerted by the FBI. Troopers in the Bureau of Criminal Investigation were alerted.
Anything on like his social media pages that tipped anything?
I can't comment. I don't know. Can't comment. Ongoing, like I said. State Police's role here was to serve the warrants and assist with the surveillance, which we've done. We've been part of major investigations. You know, these are men and women who take an oath to protect our communities and the Commonwealth here. We're very humbled with the opportunity that we had, given a case that has really gained international attention to play a small part in it. And our hat is off to Moscow PD again with the size and the complexity of this investigation and the work that they've done to get us here today. And this is only the beginning of the next step.
If it's determined that anyone here in Pennsylvania either helped to conceal or dispose of any evidence, then you would be a part of this case, or would it go to?
I would say that we would pledge whatever support we can for ongoing investigations with the Idaho authorities here in Pennsylvania. Absolutely. We would help them in any way we could.
Were there any weapons found in the home?
I don't want to get into what was actually seized in the house pursuant to the evidentiary nature of it.
Can you give any insight into why you all decided to go in overnight to make the arrest?
Those are tactical decisions in terms of base surveillance. I don't want to give out too many tactical factors that go into that situation, but obviously surveillance was conducted and we wanted to go in at a time when we thought it would be the safest for everybody. Safe.
So that's interesting. And one of the questions somebody said is Emma asked, she would have asked, how long were you surveilling him? He doesn't want, a lot of times law enforcement, especially the FBI, does not want to give up tactical information that could be used by suspects in the future to avoid them or to evade them. So that's why he doesn't want to necessarily give too much information about surveillance. And when we had another case, they wouldn't tell us, and the judge didn't make them tell us where certain listening devices were and how they did this or that. So it's very interesting that was his answer there, which is not uncommon in law enforcement investigations.
Safest for anybody else in the house, safest for Mr. Kohberger, and safest for our people.
There was an interesting question asked earlier about the care that needed to be taken to not tip the suspect off. Could you describe how long that lid had to be on things and how many people were involved in it? Like how many people knew and for how long?
So I would say, I would answer the question this way. I don't want to get into a timeline in terms of when we were notified by the FBI and when the surveillance began. Obviously, we know on Thursday night into Friday morning is when the warrants were served. I would say, as a credit to the professionals, both standing behind me and others not here, many others not here, the information was held very close. And we did not want to have any situation where Mr. Kohberger potentially would be tipped off. So as a result of that, I would say a close number of approximately 7 to 8 individuals, maybe 10 on the most within the PSP side of this operation knew about it.
And for days, can we say? Or?
I would say for a period of time. I would not feel comfortable commenting more than that for a period of time. And then as the tactical assets were brought in, people were briefed.
The movement plan is finally decided. Will there be an announcement? Will
not from the state police. So we would defer to Moscow and the authorities in Idaho.
starts leaving Pennsylvania?
Well, we have security concerns now, obviously, to move any prisoner. Anytime you move somebody from a secure prison to another place, we don't want to. There won't be an announcement from the state police in terms of those logistics, but they're being worked on right now.
Can you give us your best guess when you think he might be moved roughly? Tomorrow?
We would like to do it as soon as possible, but the court order says 10 days. We have 10 days to coordinate it.
Can you actually be on a plane tonight? Is it possible he could be on a plane tonight? That's a possibility, right?
He's saying, I don't want to say because of security reasons, but they keep pressing.
And I would think that's probably not likely.
A private plane, or would you fly commercial?
We're looking into that right now.
Can you confirm or deny that a window was broken in order to gain access into the home?
There were multiple windows that were broken, I believe,
Oh.
to gain access, as well as multiple doors. I think the video of the house after the fact confirms that. And that would all be part of the tactical plan based on the floor plan of the house, et cetera, and what the CERT operators would do to serve those warrants.
That's also something that's not uncommon. Not his house, but still smashed windows and doors.
On your radar before, and are you looking at any connections?
We wouldn't comment on that based on the ongoing nature.
How about it? Did he have a criminal past? According to the UJS, I didn't see anything.
I can't comment on a person's criminal history during an ongoing investigation.
Sorry, Mr. Mancuso said that you stand ready to assist in giving the complete background to the defendant. What specifically is law enforcement interested in?
That'll be the last question after Mr. Mancuso answers.
In any case of this nature, and I prosecuted a fair share of homicides, double homicides, that sort of thing, you want to look at any evidence of possible motive. You want to look at any evidence of a pattern, of modus operandi or method. You want to get into the subject's character, mental state to the best you can, that sort of thing. So it'll be an all-encompassing effort, which we stand ready for. Okay.
How do you
We have our ways. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We have our ways.
Just for a
yes,
quick
they do.
spelling, I'll give everyone the spelling.
Forget the spelling. We don't need to see the spelling. All right. So I'm going to get to a couple questions, but somebody just posted something interesting. We are going to do one more video. We're in overtime here. We don't have a ton of time left. NPR, I am a personal injury lawyer. We do criminal defense here as well. I stick to personal injury, though. I may have said personal injury and criminal defense because our firm does both. Zephyr K9. I don't get people defending the psycho seriously. Again, he's been accused of a crime. And I don't like to go so far as to call him a psycho or pretend like I know that he did it at this point. And that's always how this channel is going to be. In America, if Kohberger turns out to be innocent and his life is ruined, can he sue agencies involved? Only if they disregarded certain information, only if they violated his rights purposely, committed fraud, whatever it may be. Arresting the wrong person or having evidence and thinking that it's somebody going to trial and losing just because you win a trial or you're not guilty or innocent does not mean you can sue law enforcement. There's actually a lot of protections that they have and immunity that they have in these situations. There are certain situations you can get around it, though. Isabel Rankins, burglary suggests a thief. Actually, a common misconception of burglary is that people automatically think that that means he was trying to steal something, but it just means entering a dwelling without permission in order to commit a felony. And the felony that he was going to commit in this case was the murder. So it doesn't necessarily mean that he was going in there to steal anything. Deb T is a new member. Welcome, Deb T. Bodie, how is 3 a.m. safe when people think you're robbing them? It means that they're probably asleep as opposed to on guard or sitting by the door ready or setting up any traps or whatever. They're mostly asleep, which is less dangerous. I guess what they felt in this case, everybody has kind of differing tactical opinions on how they would do it, but that's why they do it in a lot of situations. Netwoman, thank you for this super chat. Who searches the car? Where is it searched? Is it towed back to Idaho? So it could actually be searched multiple times. If there's a warrant to search the car, what it seems like they had in this case, my guess is they searched it in PA. If PA takes the car and impounds it, they can also do an inventory search where they search it and figure out what all is in the car and they make a list of what's in the car. Then when it gets to Idaho, they will search it again. Again, it could be that inventory search where they search everything that's in the car. They'll probably want to search it as a part of the investigation and prosecution of the case. So it could be searched multiple times by multiple police agencies. And what's interesting in a defense attorney's case and representing this is there differences. Do the two searches come with different things? Were there certain things in the inventory search in Pennsylvania that were not there in Idaho? And if they're not there, what happened to them? And if those things are missing, are there other things missing and poking holes in the prosecution in a case like this? When you have this extradition and this transporting of vehicles and evidence and things like that, it can create issues in prosecuting the case. Val said, another question that was kind of asked there is, how many man hours did it take? He said they were doing it for a long time, for a while. All right. So there's one other video I want to play real quick. And this is from TMZ that somebody just told me they posted, and I looked it up. And let's take a listen to, this is his stop in Indiana, which is pretty interesting. This is body cam footage from the officer that pulled over Ryan and his dad. There's the white Elantra, which is interesting. So Brian was driving.
I mean, you're a little too close to back that semi. In the back of the trailer. I'm at one car 10 miles an hour, so I'm going 60 miles an hour.
So he's saying he was following too closely, and it seems like he was going too fast. I'm not positive, but I think that's what he said they were doing. He was following the trailer too closely.
6 or 7 cars. Oh, you guys did? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I hear people saying copyright. We may have to cut this part of the video for the rewatch crew, but that's okay.
Just talk about a trooper? We don't have any SUVs. It was a county guy. Was it like a black SUV? Okay, all right. You saw you guys.
So he's saying they were already pulled over by a black SUV. He's saying it wasn't a trooper. It was a county guy. Not really that important, but just to translate.
Following too closely? Okay. So like I said, it's all about how fast you're going, okay? So if you're going 10 miles an hour, you only need one car length. Or if you're going, so speed limit here is 7. If you're going 70 miles an hour, you need 7 car lengths. Yeah.
He's explaining to him how to drive.
That's the easy way to explain it.
10 miles an hour, you need 1 car length. 70 miles, you need 7.
Yeah. Okay. It's really easy in the B&B man, it says 2 seconds. All right. You guys have a safe trip. Where y'all heading? Thank you so much. Where y'all heading to? Where at? Yeah, it's a long haul. You guys scared of airplanes? Did you? Okay. All right, well, hey, peace out, safe trip. Thank you.
Not a ton there, but enough to see that Brian was the one driving. No ticket. Now, it doesn't seem like there's any connection here with the arrest or any information I got here, but it's a lawful reason to pull him over. Apparently, he didn't give him a ticket, right? Which is interesting. Number one, they told him that they just got pulled over. Usually a law enforcement officer is more likely to give you a ticket if you just got pulled over and you're still not obeying the rules of the road. Third, he very clearly asked him where they were going. I'm interested to see if this Indiana trooper was in contact with PA, with the FBI, with anybody in Idaho. And that's why he asked the question specifically to find out where he was going so they knew where he was going. So that's interesting as well. And when you talk about all this information, did they get it appropriately? It would be fruit of the poisonous tree and inadmissible if they did not have a valid reason to pull him over. Now, the reason he said he pulled him over very clearly was he was following too closely for how fast he was going, which is a subjective thing for law enforcement officers, and it's up to their discretion as to whether or not you pull somebody over. Kind of like you didn't stop at the stop bar, your two tires were past the stop bar. Is that really dangerous? Probably not, but they technically can pull you over for it. So that's really interesting to see if this does become a part of the puzzle, which on this channel, Pat's Cats just became a member. On this channel, we are going to continue covering it. So please make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We're going to have to take off today. We did overtime. Usually it's about an hour. Appreciate everybody joining in here. Hit that like button on your way out. Tell your friends if they're interested in this case to come join our channel, join the chat, join the conversation. Appreciate all you being here. Until next time.